All right, we are in Psalms 109. I want you to draw your attention to verse 8. It says, let his days be few, and let another take his office. Let his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. Let his children be continually vagabonds, and beg. Let them seek their bread also out of their desolate places. And you say, oh, that's a pretty rough scripture there. That's a rough thing to be praying against somebody. And it's believed that this passage here is actually prophetic about Judas Iscariot. Whenever the book of Acts, it was when they were looking to appoint somebody to take his place, they referred to a place in the scriptures where it says, in his bishopric, let another man take. And it's believed that it was alluding to this particular psalm right here. So Judas was obviously an extremely bad individual. He was referred to as the son of perdition. Jesus said it would have been better for him that he should not be born. So when you see these very strong words, just because it was applied against Judas, who was a very evil person, this doesn't mean you get to apply this to everybody you don't like and pray that they all die and their children be fatherless and all that kind of stuff. But so that's another subject for another day. But what I do want to speak about tonight, though, specifically, is something that's mentioned in here. It says, let his children be continually vagabonds. And I want to preach tonight about not being, or don't, the title of my message is, don't be a vagabond. And that word vagabond, it's a word we don't use that often in our modern vocabulary. Sometimes we do, but it's probably should be used a lot because our culture is full of vagabonds. I mean, vagabonds are all over the place. I mean, it's a large segment of our American population, people who are literal vagabonds, but not just literal vagabonds, but it's actually a character problem that a lot of people have. And because we are a very prosperous nation and we have a lot of good things going for us, it's still possible to be kind of a vagabond in character without having some of the typical attributes of a vagabond that we're going to see as we talk about that. But that the definition of vagabond, it means wandering, moving from place to place without any settled habitation as a vagabond exile, or wandering, floating about without any certain direction, driven to and fro. And another definition is a vagrant, one who wanders from town to town or place to place, having no certain dwelling, or not abiding in it. By the laws of England and of the United States, vagabonds are liable to be taken up and punished. This is the Webster's 1828. If that's just who you were, they could punish you for it. It's always interesting seeing the evolution of words, like from the 1828 and how they are today. And so I want to look at the other two places in the Bible where we see this word vagabond. We see it in Genesis chapter 4. In verse 12, it says, when thou tillest the ground, this is when God's cursing Cain, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. But Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. Why? People don't like vagabonds. People don't like just these bums, these wanderers. But the reason this is going to happen to them is God says that I'm cursing the ground for you. It's not going to yield her strength. And so as a result of that, Cain was going to be somebody who was going to struggle financially. He was going to be probably impoverished. And as a result of that, he's going to kind of be going from place to place. He's not going to be able to get established anywhere and to get settled and do the things that people want to do in those days where they go somewhere, get established, build a home and a community and thrive. But it wasn't going to work for Cain. He would be a vagabond. He would be a wanderer. We see in Acts 19, verse 11, and God wrought special miracles by the hand of Paul, so that from his body were brought unto the sick handkerchiefs or aprons, and the diseases departed from them, and evil spirits went out for them. So Paul obviously is getting a lot of attention because of these great things he's doing. Then certain of the vagabond Jews, exorcists, took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits in the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, we adjure you by Jesus, whom Paul preaches. And there were 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jew, and a chief of the priests, which did so. And the evil spirit answered and said, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are ye? And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped on them and overcame them and prevailed, against them, so that they fled out of that house naked and wounded. So we have these guys, they are referred to as vagabond Jews. What does that mean? These were guys, they were Jews, but they were just kind of wanderers. They were kind of just bums. They were kind of like gypsies, just people who, they were Jewish, but they had no settled presence anywhere. These are not people who are respected, but they claim to have some kind of power. They tried casting devils out of this man. Didn't work. I mean, the demon is just like, who are you guys? I know who Paul is, I know who Jesus is. And he went and he beat the tar out of all of them. Sent him away, humiliated, naked, wounded. And so the modern English term vagabond, it often implies idleness, worthlessness, or disreputable behavior, which is a more negative connotation than intended by the original biblical text, where it simply meant wanderer or itinerant. In historical or biblical concepts, some people, including early Christians, under persecution were forced to be wanderers through no fault of their own, which carried a different meaning than the idle vagabonds described in a general sense. So this is one of the definitions of it you can find online if you look up vagabond. And it's one of those things, it's kind of a politically incorrect term, because that term vagabond, it implies certain negative things. However, somebody can be a vagabond for legitimate reasons, and it doesn't make them a terrible person. And so when it comes to vagabond and the way they're viewed, it's very similar to kind of how we are often with the poor. Okay? We should not be down on somebody just because they're poor. I think we all would agree with that, right? And we shouldn't be down on somebody just because they're a vagabond. We shouldn't treat someone different because they're poor. And we shouldn't treat someone different because they're a vagabond. But at the same time, there's often kind of a prejudice in us. You know why that is? Because sometimes, for example, with the poor, the reason they are poor, it's a character issue. It's not a situational thing. For example, if somebody's house burns down, sometimes there's some kind of crisis, something happens that's beyond their control, and as a result, somebody loses everything. It wasn't because they were poor or because they were a bad character. Difficult things came. Somebody can be a vagabond for the same reason. But often, poverty is a result of a character problem. How many times have you heard stories about people, poor people, who won the lottery and it only made their life worse? It didn't matter. You know why? Because that person who won the lottery, even though they were given millions of dollars, it didn't change their character. The reason they were poor before was because they were a lazy, worthless, good-for-nothing person with no character, no self-control, no brains, and they did foolish things with their money before, like buy lottery tickets. They just got lucky. And then now that you've given them $1 million, you know what they're going to do? They're going to do more foolish things. And they spend a fortune on drugs and alcohol, and they just destroy their lives. They go and they just make the dumbest financial decisions you can imagine. And guess what? Not long later, they're right back to being impoverished, even though they had millions given to them, because it didn't change their character. We see in Proverbs 24:30, I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction, yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. What are we seeing here in Proverbs? Solomon, he's looking and he is observing and noticing by the state of this home, this is a slothful person. This is a person who hasn't just fallen on hard times. This is a person who is of poor character. They're lazy. They're worthless. They're good for nothing. And there's a lot of examples of this in Psalms about the slothful, about the sluggard, and how poverty is going to be the result, is going to be what they experience. And so understand, there's many reasons people might find themselves in a state of poverty. Many reasons somebody might find themselves in the state of being a vagabond that is not a result of bad character or a result of sin, which is why we don't want to just be prejudiced and treat people differently. I want you all to get that. We don't treat poor people bad. We don't want to treat vagabonds bad, but we also don't want to be poor. And we also don't want to be a vagabond. And if you find yourself in a state of poverty, in a state of being a vagabond, it ought to be your goal and your desire to get out of that. But let me just say, there are some people who are vagabonds today because they want to be a vagabond. You see that hippie out there just wandering the streets, going from place to place, living in a tent? It's not because they fell on hard times. A lot of these people out there begging for money, they're not there because just circumstances didn't go their way. They're there because that's what they want. They're of poor character. So again, just if we can get a hold of this fact that I'm not here today to make a list of rules or anything like that. I'm just saying, just like we all should strive to not be impoverished, we should strive to not be a vagabond either. But there are legitimate reasons. There are people today in America that have immigrated over here, legally, maybe even illegally, because of wars where they were from. You think about that Ukrainian girl that came over to America to be safe from wars, and unfortunately, she was murdered over here in America, and it outraged the country as it should have. But she's over here not because, and she left because of war and trying to get established over here in America. I understand people want to do that. In fact, if I didn't live in America, I would probably try to sneak over the border and try to come over here. I'd try to do it legally too. But you know what? I think we ought to, do what we can to help people like that. Sometimes there's famines, whether it be some kind of famine as a result of droughts and things, or even just bad governments sometimes ruin places where people live. It causes they destroy the job market in that area, and sometimes people have to pack up and they got to move somewhere else. And that stinks when you have to do that. These people, it's not because they have bad character, but they have to uproot their families because of things like that. Bad governments. Sometimes people have to leave places because of religious persecution. And so they find themselves a vagabond in many cases. But again, they don't have the character of a vagabond. And if you don't have bad character, even if you find yourself in a place where you're impoverished, you have to move or something like that, relocate. If you have good character, you know what? You'll find a way you'll thrive in that new place that you go to. But it should be your goal and desire to get to that new place and get established, get some roots down, and be consistent in your life. But some people, they want to just be that wanderer. They want to be that person that never gets established anywhere, that doesn't have any roots, and it's because they are of poor character, and you don't want to be that person. And so hopefully you understand, being a vagabond it's a negative thing, it's a negative situation, but it's not always the result of bad character, even though often it is. Often people are there because of bad character, and we have to point this out. Because culturally, in America, we're becoming a vagabond culture. We're not established as a people. We're not allowed to even promote a culture that is biblical. We've got our country in a panic. A lot of people in a panic over this talk of Christian nationalism, talking about Christianizing in America and making Christian laws, and people are just horrified by that kind of thing. And it's like, the reason a lot of people are promoting Christianity, the reason they're wanting to promote laws that reflect laws we see in the Bible is because they want our nation to survive. Well, we've got a lot of people pushing for a Sodom and Gomorrah type society. I'll take the Christian society over the Sodom and Gomorrah society. And if you want to call it Christian nationalism or whatever, I don't really care what you call it. It's just what are we actually promoting? And I like a lot of the stuff people are promoting in there. I like a Christian society. I don't like the idea of electing Muslims to office, because you know what they're going to do? They're going to push their Muslim ways. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Pastor, would you not vote for somebody just because they're a Muslim? Yes. Yes, just because of that. I'm not embarrassed by that. I would rather vote for a Christian than a Muslim for anything. Even if it was the dog catcher, I'd rather have a Christian than a Muslim. And I'm not embarrassed by that. I'm not ashamed to admit I want to promote a Christian culture because I want our culture to last. I want our society to survive And to keep going, I don't want to just be this melting pot of whatever we feel like being today. I don't think that's a good thing. That's a vagabond culture. And it's not going to make it. We're going to be wanderers. We're not allowed to know who we are. And they're doing that in the countries all over the place. Countries that do have cultures, they're always trying to bring in the Muslims in all these places, and they're changing everything. And then people freak out, and then everybody just calls them racist. Call them whatever, phobe or whatever. And it's just like, no, they want to promote a culture. We're allowed to want to do that. And, and we're not, what we don't want to do is allow a bunch of wanderers to dictate what we do in our country. Because we want to keep going. We want to survive as a people. And so while I'm not here today to make a bunch of rules for how to live your life, because circumstances are going to often demand we make changes, I do want to encourage everyone to at least shoot for stability in your life. Shoot for stability. And if your life is unstable, you just need to recognize, hey, this isn't good. We should work on this. We need to figure out how to get out of this situation. I'm not down on people being poor, but I think you ought to work on not being poor anymore. I'm not down on people if they're going through hard times, as long as they're working towards not being in hard times anymore. But you have some people, they just want you to just delay the inevitable. And again, if somebody needs money, I want to be able to help, but if all I'm going to do is help you make your next drug purchase, I'd rather not give you any money. I'm not going to help you in that situation. I don't mind buying groceries for somebody if they need some food, but if I'm buying your groceries so you'll have your beer money, I'd rather not buy your groceries either. Because you've got a character problem. That's why you're in this situation. I've had many people who have called the church throughout the years, too, who've told me they're considering moving here. And sometimes we do. We attract people because of online presence and things like that. But a lot of these people I've talked to, I have perceived very quickly with many of them that they're vagabonds in character. And whenever I perceive these people are vagabonds in character, I always try to steer them away from here. It's like, listen, if you're just coming here for some action, if you're just coming here for some excitement, I can recommend some other places that'll probably be a little more exciting. Now, I personally, and listen, this is Rock Falls, Illinois. If you're looking for adventure, excitement, this isn't the place. Okay? But here's the thing I like about Rock Falls. If you're looking for a place to raise your family, if you're looking for a place to establish yourself, buy property, to buy a home, to live, to be safe, I think this is a fantastic place for raising a family. God bless those who have figured out, and I haven't met them yet, but have figured out how to raise kids in cities and to raise men that are actually manly men and to raise women that are actually good. I'm not impressed with city culture. Okay? Listen, if somebody lives in a city, I can't show you a place in the Bible where it says it's a sin to live in a city. I'm just not seeing a product come from the city that I'm impressed with. And it's a different culture. And it's one that doesn't have as typically as strong family values. And I'm not seeing people get it done. I grew up rural country. This is all I know, but this is the kind of place I think it's great for establishing some roots and getting yourself established. But this idea of being this vagabond thing, or if you're just looking for excitement, a lot of times that's the vagabond. They want to go somewhere where they have no responsibilities, they have no roots, they have no accountability. And listen, if that's you, this is not the place for you. Okay? If you're that vagabond online watching, you don't want to come to Liberty Baptist Church. You'll hate it here, I promise. And we'll make sure you hate it here. Because, now, if you want to fix your character, I think you'll love it here. But again, when you have bad character, you're not supposed to enjoy your life. You're just not going to. And they're not going to do good even where the excitement's at. They'll have fun for a little bit, but then they're going to have to move on and go to the next thing. And while they seem to want the life of the vagabond, but I'm going to show you why that's wrong, but often why many choose that life. Is you don't want this to be you. And listen, I'm sorry, we've had a lot of vagabonds come through this church. People who are vagabonds in character. And it's just like, you hope you can preach it out of them. You hope you can inspire people to be better. But it's just like that, we've all watched enough Hallmark movies and things like that. We would love to be that person who went and just helped that poor person, lifted them out of the gutter, helped them get a job and established and get their life on track. There is not one person in here that wouldn't love to help a person go from being a bum and a druggie to just a good functional citizen. The problem is these people who are in those states, that's exactly what they want for themselves. Yeah, they want you to give them money, but they don't want to change their life. They like their life the way it is. They like being a bum. They like the lack of responsibility they have. They love the fact that they have no accountability whatsoever. But that is a terrible way to live, and we do not promote that. We do not support that way of life. And so, but we need to understand that is not something we ought to be okay with. That is not something we ought to shoot for. And the first thing I want you to understand, the life of a vagabond is wrong because it is more difficult, too, on the wife and children. All right, men, get a hold of this, because let me tell you, the vagabonds that have come through this church, it was a character flaw in the men. And you know who it is harder on when you're a vagabond? The wife and children. Because let me tell you, men, we are stronger. Okay, if the women are the weaker vessels, we're the stronger vessel. And we are the stronger vessel. We are typically the more adventurous ones. And I imagine every man in here was like this at some point. But young men, I was very thankful when Tommy, got married and had a kid, because the guy's a maniac. Is always just doing dangerous things. And I'm glad my boys are married now, because when you get married, all of a sudden you typically are a little more careful, because you know what? You've got somebody depending on you. When you have a wife and you have a kid, you understand, hey, I can't just be a maniac anymore. It helps calm you down. And that, and that's okay. Guys, you ought to naturally have a desire to, do dangerous things and all that. But eventually, again, you got, as long as when you get married and you start having kids, it's like, you know what? I can't be reckless anymore. And even if that doesn't do it for you, eventually you're going to get older and you're going to realize, when I fall down, I hurt for weeks. And I'm definitely at that point in my life right now. My boys went skiing a couple years ago and wanted me to go with them. And I was like, man, I would love to go skiing. But I knew I would pay the consequences for weeks. And so that survival instinct is just, I used to want to go skydiving. Now it's like, are you kidding me? There's no way I want to do something like that. But and guys, we like to talk about going and just living out in a cabin in the woods somewhere, living off the grid. We love the idea of that. Hey, listen, and men, if you feel that way, I think that's perfectly natural. But why aren't we doing it? You want to know why we're usually not doing it? Oh, it's because you're gently led by your wives. No, it's not because we're gently led by our wives. It's because we're gently leading our wives, which I think is actually biblical. We see with Jacob in Genesis 33:12, and he said, let us take our journey. Him and Esau meet up with each other and like, hey, let's go. Let's take our journey together. And let us go, and I will go before thee. Esau is speaking here. And he said unto him, my Lord knoweth that the children are tender, now Jacob speaking, and the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servants, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure until I come unto my Lord unto Seir. You know what Jacob did, who was a great leader? Whenever it came time to go, Esau's like, hey, let's go on the journey. And Jacob, he's ready to go. I mean, Jacob could have handled the trip just fine. But Jacob, it wasn't about just what he was doing. And Jacob, he understood that, hey, my wife, who is an help meet for me, she is not my property to destroy. I am a husband. You know what a husband does? A husband, he is somebody he is a steward of something. And a husband is to take care of his wife. And you know what? He wasn't going to hurt his wife. He wasn't going to hurt his children. Well, I'm the leader. I'm the boss. Deal with it. No, you're the husband. You take care of them. You look out for them. And he understood the limitations of his family. And so he's like, you know what, Esau, you go ahead and go on. I'll get to you eventually, but I've got to lead on softly because I've got animals. He even cared about the animals. Are you kidding? You're going to let the animals dictate what you do? Hey, I need those animals, but I got to take care of them. I can't destroy them. I don't want to be reckless. And you've got a bunch of vagabond in spirit men out there destroying their families, and they call it leading by strength. They call it leading. It's not leading. It's them being ignorant. It's them being foolish. And they're destroying their families. And we need to understand, our wives, they are the weaker vessel. Our children are weaker than we are. And as strong as and adventurous as we are, women and children are not. And we need to consider what we are putting themselves through. 1 Peter 3:5, for after this manner in old time the holy women also, who trusted in God, adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husbands, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well and are not afraid with any amazement. And everybody likes that part. And let me tell you, that is exactly what wives should do with their husbands. They should submit to their authority. They should do what they are told to do. That is exactly what God called for the ladies to do. But you know what, men? Because you know what? God cares about your wife. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Understand, you've got a woman, and if you have a woman who is submissive to you and obeys you and respects you as a leader, you ought to thank God for that. You ought to treasure that. You ought to value that. You ought to be thankful for that. And you ought to say, you know what? I'm not going to do anything to destroy this. I don't want to hurt this wonderful thing that God gave me. My wife is following me. My children are depending on me. I am going to lead them in a way that is going to benefit them. And you know what? That might mean I miss out on an adventure or two. That might mean I don't get to do everything I want to do. You know, I'd like to go on a long hunting trip, you know, somewhere. Just, can you imagine just being able to get away for a month? I had a preacher tell me a while back, he's like, and he gave me this advice. I think it was good advice, but he gave it to me. I should have had him give it to all of you. But he's like, let me tell you something, Pastor. You need to take care of yourself spiritually, just like you do the flock. And it would do you good to occasionally just get away by yourself and just go take several days just alone with you and God. Go around a cabin. I think that was great advice. And I think, you know what, and I need to have him come back here and tell all of you that, so y'all make me do that. Because I kind of feel, you know, because it's like, when he told me that, I was like, I would love that so much. I feel embarrassed asking. Because it's just like, you're basically asking just for a vacation all by myself. And I also need him to tell my wife that too. So understand, again, while we love the idea of that, yeah, boy, can you imagine just the spiritual time I could have away for a month? Man, that would be great for me. But I also have a wife that I have impregnated several times. And there's a whole bunch of kids she has to take care of. And it's not easy. So while it would be very easy for me to do that, it wouldn't be very easy on my wife. And so I probably should take that into consideration. That you let your wife run you. Well, again, you know, there are weirdos out there that would say that, but since they don't even have control of their homes and have been banished to basements, I really don't care. Okay? You know, as somebody who sleeps in the master bedroom at our house, I really don't care. But again, you know, there's a reason, okay? Listen, God gets all the glory, but, you know, it does help when you follow what God said to do. When you follow what God said to do, He's more likely to bless you than if you don't follow what He says to do. But again, you know, one of the reasons we've gotten to where we are as a family is because, again, it's not just about me. It is about putting those underneath you first. It's about putting others first. And yes, I am the head of the home, but that I am not to. The point of being the head of the home is not so you can take advantage of the people God has given you. It's so you can. It's like, hey, I'm the head of the home. That's a great privilege. Now I can do what's best for them. And since I love them more than I love myself, it's not about my rank and what I'm biblically allowed to do to my wife and children. No, it's about actually doing what's best for them and benefits them. And I'm thankful that I am leader of the home because nobody cares about them more than I do. And I think they will be better off, they will be best off if I'm in charge, if I'm the one making decisions. But you know what? There's some rats out there who happen to be men. And you know what? The decisions they make, it's not about what benefits their wife and kids the most, it's what benefits themselves personally. And you know what? And they wonder why they're failing with their families. And so understand, as leaders, we do not want to just be wandering around and just not establishing roots. That is difficult on the wife and children. And women, while you should do everything in your power to support, help, follow your husbands, husbands need to do all we can to not harm them. And again, think about that word husband, or think about the word husbandman. Husbandry. These are words that we see in the Bible. A husbandman he's like a steward of a farm. This farm is not mine, but I am the husbandman of it. It's my job not to destroy the animals, but to take care of the animals. To take care of these things. And let me tell you something, when it comes to your wife and your children, they are from God. And you know what? They ultimately belong to Him. And so you know what? You don't get to just do whatever you want with them. You take care of them. You do what's best for them. Ephesians 5:28 says, so ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man yet ever hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. You nourish and you cherish. You know what you don't do? You don't beat your wife. You don't beat yourself. And you do. You have people out there that want to justify beating their wives when they don't beat themselves. I wish they would just punch themselves in the face when they say things like that. That's a bunch of foolishness. No, you're not. And you don't have a right to do that. Because guess what? While they're your wife, yes, given to you by God to be a husband to take care of. Those children you have are a heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is His reward. And God didn't give you those things so you could destroy them. You got to take care of them. And it's sad to just see the vagabonds out there, people that are just moving their families around all over the place. The kids just have no stability in their life. They make friends and then they have to lose friends. They make friends. And listen, sometimes, again, I'm not telling you can't ever move. I mean, we uprooted our family one time and moved. We did that. But you know what? When we did that, there was a plan. I wanted to pastor for a long time, but I also knew it's difficult on the family to uproot the family and change everything. And we did. We decided a long time ago that when that time comes, we only want to do this one time. So I only want to uproot our family one time. I don't want to keep doing that. And it wasn't. It was a challenging thing to leave a church and a people that we knew and loved and to come to a new place where we didn't know anybody. I remember going through that one time as a kid. I remember when we were in a church for 5 years and my dad moved us to another church and I remember being hard as a kid. But we moved there, we stayed, we had stability in our life, we thrived, God bless, and the Lord has done the same thing for us here. But I knew as a parent, I can't do that over and over and over again with my kids. I can't, it doesn't work. And I see people trying that all the time, people too, who even want to go in the ministry, and they're just going from place to place. I mean, and let me tell you, I could preach a sermon about this. It wouldn't matter because, you all aren't pastors or in the ministry, but I have known many vagabond pastors. They just go from church to church to church, and typically they go to church, destroy it, another church, destroy it, another church, destroy it, and it's always the church's fault. It's like, dude, you destroyed like 4 in the last 5 years. I'm starting to think you're the problem here. It's like, come on. But they just can't stay anywhere. There's one guy I know, full-blown vagabond. This guy is everything I'm talking about. I haven't, like every year or two I'll think about him. And when I do, I'll look him up on social media, and he's always in a new ministry. He can't stay in anything for any length of time. This guy's even found a couple churches that have made him pastor, which was so weird. And he never stays. You know why? Because he's a vagabond in character. He was a vagabond in character when I knew him. He was a vagabond, when we went to church with him, and he's never changed. Just constantly going from one place to another. And I'm telling you, his kids aren't going to turn out. It's not going to happen. Most families, most women, most children can't handle that thing. And so the life of the vagabond, it's wrong because of that constant replanning. It's only going to weaken you. It weakens you financially. It weakens you morally. It'll weaken you spiritually. You don't want, it's not good to just constantly take a literal plant or a tree, uproot it, replant it, uproot it, replant it. You're not going to get much fruit from that tree if you're constantly doing that kind of thing. You can do it. It can be done. It's a difficult process. It's challenging, but every time you do it, you're risking losing it. And again, there are times you have to do it. There's times people can't help it. But at some point, you just got to stick. And we see in Psalms 92. And let me just say this too. There's people out there who maybe because of the type of job that they had, maybe they're in the military and things. It's just it's almost a way of life for them. But even many people like that I've known, especially the successful ones, who, never necessarily stayed in one place for very long. They were at least consistent in their job because it was like military. And they kept certain routines in their life wherever they went. And these people too that succeed, wherever they go, you know what you find? Even though they have to move from place to place, they're always in a church. No matter where they're always in a church. There's certain things in their home. They hold certain standards. And listen, I tell this to parents too. If you get saved later in your life, you start adding standards and things like that, your kids will let you do that once, especially your girls. But you know what? If you move to one church, you start practicing their standards, and then you move to a liberal church, you lose your standards, the chances of you getting to go back to the standards again are very slim. Maybe if your kids were real little. They're just not going to let you keep doing that to them over and over and over again. You've got to get established somewhere. But we see in Psalm 92:12, the righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those that be planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of God, our God. They shall still bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat, and flourishing. Those who are planted in the house of God. And let me tell you something. Everybody should be planted in the house of God. And even if you have to move, you know what you can still do? You can still be planted in the house of God. If you ever move from this church, just as you are plugged into this church and involved in this church and faithful in this church, as soon as your carcass enters into the next city, the next state, whatever, your carcass better be in a church. If I were you, I wouldn't recommend missing a single week. I wouldn't back out of anything. Just like you were involved here, as soon as you get in there, you ought to get involved as fast as you can. You know why? Because you want your family planted in the house of God. It doesn't take long for church to leave your way of life. It does not take long at all. You never want to take a break. I've seen people, I'm just taking a break. I've seen men in the ministry who took a break from the ministry. And you know what they all have in common? Everybody I've ever talked to who ever just took a break from the ministry, they're all still taking that break. Years and years later, they're still on that break. That was a long break. But you don't ever want to take a break. You want to be planted in the house of the Lord. And look at the way false prophets, this is interesting too, the way false prophets are described. In Judges 1:8 it says, likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. They don't like authorities. They don't like anybody telling them what to do. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but that which they know naturally as brute beasts. In those things they corrupt themselves. Woe unto them, for they are gone in the way of Cain. What was one of the things about Cain? He was a fugitive and a vagabond. He was a wanderer. Ran greedily after the heir of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. These are spots in your feasts of charity when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about of winds. Trees whose fruit withereth without fruit. Twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Raging waves of the sea, moving around, foaming out their own shame. Wandering stars. That's the one thing about stars. Stars, you can count on them. I mean, they're always in the same place. Not those wandering ones, not those shooting stars. Now, those shooting stars, they get a lot of attention. They're really cool, but they're not going to help you navigate your life, navigate anything on the water, because they don't last. to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. So understand, these false prophets, they're all over the place. They're not established. And let me tell you, this is why you don't want to put a vagabond in charge of anything. It's just that you can't trust him. You can't count on them. 1 Corinthians 4:1, let a man so account of us as the ministers of Christ, the stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Anybody who's going to be put in charge of anything ought to be someone who has proven themselves faithful. Somebody you can count on. Not some vagabond just going all over the place doing its own things. But many choose the way of the vagabond because it takes away accountability. Isn't it nice to just be able to work? You know, wouldn't it be nice to have a job where you could just work when you felt like it? You know, when you didn't have a boss checking to see if you show up on time. You know, that accountability, it's challenging. You know, one of the things that's challenging about having a wife and children, they expect you to provide for them, don't they? Can you imagine? How dare people put expectations on us? How dare my job expect me to show up for work? Yeah, it's accountability. And you don't want to know why a lot of people are disabled today? Because of anxiety. The anxiety of being expected to do something, being expected to work, and it's ridiculous. But you know what? People, they don't like that accountability. Let me illustrate something about faithfulness, though, with Timothy. In 1 Corinthians 4:16, it says, wherefore I beseech you, be ye followers of me, for this cause have I left unto you Timotheus, who is my beloved son, and faithful in the Lord, who shall bring you into remembrance of my ways, which be in Christ, as I teach everywhere in every church. Notice Timotheus, he was faithful. And while I cannot give a specific amount of time that qualifies somebody as faithful, I think we're all aware that faithfulness requires some time to pass, doesn't it? And really, it's like, well, how much time? Well, the amount is really up to whoever's making the decision. You know, it's kind of relative depending on the situation. But understand, Paul was not somebody who not only had observed Timothy, but Paul was he had even observed his family. He says in 2 Timothy 1:5, when I call to remembrance the unfeigned, not fake. How did he know his faith was unfeigned? It wasn't fake. Because he'd observed him. He'd seen him go through challenges. He saw him go through difficulties. When he'd seen that, he remembered that unfeigned faith that was in thee, which dwelt first in thy grandmother Lois. I've seen that in your grandma, Timothy, and also in your mother Eunice. And I'm seeing it in you also. Hey, we've got a track record in your family. You got a faithful grandmother. You've got a faithful mother. And you know what, Timothy? You're faithful too. Paul, he knew he could count on Timothy because not only had Timothy shown himself faithful, but he came from a long line of faithful. And he was like, you know what? This is somebody we can put in charge of something. But let me tell you, there are many people out there today. In fact, we've had the vagabonds. The vagabonds that come through here, they love talking about how faithful they are. They love talking about how much soul winning they do. They love talking about how hardcore they are against the reprobates and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? We never observe these people faithfulness. You know what they can't do? They can't even have somebody verify their faithfulness. You know what they usually have a long track record of? Going from church to church to church to church. Why? They're vagabonds. But you know what? Faithfulness, it's something that you can observe. But that requires accountability. And the vagabond is just typically not faithful to anything. And so we see in 1 Timothy 1:12, I thank Christ Jesus our Lord, who hath enabled me, for he counted me faithful, putting me into the ministry. Even so, and then 1 Timothy 3:11, even so must our wives be grave, not slanderers, sober, faithful in all things. Okay, we want people who are faithful. Qualification of a bishop, if any man be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. Okay, faithful. Again, how do you know if something's faithful? Observing. You have to have time to observe. And the reason many choose the life of the vagabond, they can't stand being judged. But do you understand, if we're checking to see who's faithful, you know what we're doing? We're judging them. Hey, how did this person handle this difficulty? You know, when we went through this challenge, when we went through the church split, what did this person do? How did they handle these things? When they went through this hard time, when they had a sickness that they dealt with, when they had an injury, what did they do? And when they have just this long line or this long track record of quitting and doing a new thing and a new thing and a new thing, because they're a vagabond. They're not faithful. You can't count on people like that. And I've known so many people that is just kind of who they are. They're just constantly all over the place. They just can't stand being judged, but people are going to judge you. Well, I can't get a job because I can't handle the anxiety of getting a job interview and letting people judge me. Well, that's just what you have to do. People are going to judge you. And in the ministry, it's just too risky using people who are untested. We see that Paul, he didn't want to take John Mark with him on an important trip. And I can, and again, while I typically like to side with Barnabas in that fight, I understand Paul's concern. Paul would deal with a lot of challenges. Paul was often going to prison and getting beaten, and you needed to have somebody with you could count on. But he didn't think it was good to take him. You know why? Because he had departed from them. He'd left them before. It's like, I'm sorry, but I can't count on you. And again, I think most people agree. John Mark kind of redeemed himself later. I think Paul changed his mind. But Paul had a reason for not wanting to use him. He had not proven himself faithful. You have people like Demas. For Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed unto Thessalonica. Crescens to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. You need people you can count on, because when people give up and quit the ministry, it hurts other people. It discourages other people. And you know what? Especially too, when you have a church that's got new people in it and new Christians and baby Christians, we don't want to hurt these people. But if we're using people who are unfaithful and they give up and they quit, it affects other people. And I don't care who you are in this church, when you give up and when you quit, it discourages people. Whether it's just attending church, whether it's singing in the choir, whatever it is, when you quit, when you give up, it's discouraging. And you know what? We don't need discouragement. We need encouragement. And you know what? Whatever we're doing, we ought to be faithful no matter what. But sometimes it's just a whole lot easier to quit. And the fact that people are faithful, one of the things, anytime I even think and the devil messes with me and tries to get me to quit, it's like, it's really hard for me to do that. There's too many people who've been faithful here for way too long. And it's just like, you know what? How can I give up when all these other people aren't giving up? But if you all quit, that makes it a lot easier. I mean, you can make it real easy for me if you all just quit. Please don't. But at the same time, it would. It'd make me more likely to quit too. I'd like to think I'd keep going, but I'm not Superman. And so as a pastor, as somebody who's been in the ministry for 25 years, I am aware. I am very aware of how much we depend on other people. That's the thing that's challenging about pastoring. There are some jobs you can do where it's all about your performance. It's all about what you do. And if you work hard and you do what you're supposed to do, you can succeed, you can make extra money. But when you're a pastor, when you're a ministry leader and things like that, the success of your ministry depends very much on the faithfulness of volunteers. That was before Elijah started helping with the choir, that was one of the talks I had to have with him. I said, hey, this is one of the things that stinks about being a choir director. Everybody's a volunteer. You can't make anybody do anything. And whether we succeed or fail as a choir, it depends on people being faithful to practices and all these things. But you can't make anybody do anything. And I'm sure Elijah has these dreams of just us sounding just fantastic and just having perfect voices, but you get what the hand you're dealt. And some of us aren't the greatest singers, and some of us aren't going to be able to change that. But hopefully we're at least faithful, and we can just show up, and I think we could improve if we keep practicing and keep working at it, and at least let them see that progress. But it's discouraging. I was a choir director for years. And it was just, I understood how important it was for certain practices that people show up. And it would just be frustrating sometimes because there's expectations. People, and people just didn't stink and show up. And it's just like, sometimes I think about it and I start getting mad about it, even all these years later. Okay, don't do that to Brother Elijah, all right? I understand the sacrifice he's making. But that's the way it is. And you do when you get a bunch of vagabond choir members, and I've had those people before. They want to show up and sing when it's a song they like. And listen, I'm already getting triggered. I'm having PTSD. I'm having non-flashbacks right now. You have these vagabond choir members that they do. They know that I would see them. I'm up there leading singing, and it's like they thought I'm not going to see them out in the congregation. Like, why are they? Yeah, they didn't like that song. They had a bad. You know how rotten that is to just sit out the song because you don't like it. It's a team effort. What is wrong with you people? They're not even here to hear this, but non-flashbacks. I'm telling you, PTSD. That's frustrating stuff. It's discouraging. But you know what? If you're actually faithful, you know what you're going to do? You're going to be there for the boring songs. You're going to do the songs that you hate, and they're too difficult for you, or whatever. You're going to do what you have to do. That's the way these things are supposed to work. And so, in closing, and having said all this, just briefly, I want to go over this, show you these scriptures, and I want you to notice the terminology that is often used that is related to the vagabond, or language we see for the faithful. See, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, but whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. That's that vagabond. Whatever way the wind's blowing, that's where they're going. We were talking about this with our kids in Hawaii. You know what you have in Hawaii? A bunch of vagabonds. They're not the natives. They're not the people it's people from over here that go over there in this paradise climate with people on vacation with money where they can get handouts, and they go and they live on the streets and they live like a bum. And you know what? They're miserable too, by the way. But they do. They love the idea of having no responsibility. Just vagabonds. And we're not supposed to be that way. Our church is not just a place where you come and you have a little action, you have a little adventure. No, this is a place where you come and you get stable. That's why God gave the apostles, prophets, evangelists, and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body in Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, under the measure of stature of fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. You know what I've seen? In fact, one of the vagabonds that visited here a couple times, one of the vagabonds showed up for some of our soul winning things that we had. Guess what he is now? Catholic. How do you go from hard? And he was too good for all the Baptist churches in his areas. Now he's a Catholic. How do you go from hardcore, soul winning, independent, fundamental Baptist, not putting up with Zionism, not putting up with any of that stuff, to a Catholic? You know why? Because he was a vagabond. That's exactly what he was. And I've seen that with many of these people. The ones who came in talking tough, talking a big game and all these things. Just reprobating every pastor out there for not using the right terminology, not having all the perfect doctrines and every little thing. And some of these people, they're Orthodox, they're Calvinists, they're all these different things now. How do you go from that? From this to that? They're a vagabond. Pretty soon they'll be a Mormon. Pretty soon they'll be an agnostic. I mean, they're going to keep changing. Next thing you know, they'll be a vampire or something like that, like Bill Schnoblin was. Just going in the other way. It's absolutely not. There's a lot more scriptures we can go, but we see that kind of terminology just in 2 Peter 2:4, having eyes full of adultery, cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls. And heart they have exercised with covetous practices, cursed children, unstable souls. And there are people who are it's just in their nature to constantly change. Constantly. And it isn't the only fault in these people, but it's one that's always there. And so that instability, you understand, that's what stopped Reuben from leading his brethren. Judah, he was number 4. But what did Jacob say when he was blessing his sons? When he got to Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. He had a lot of great qualities, but unstable as water. Thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up into my couch. That instability of Reuben. He said, you know what? You can't lead your brethren. Simeon and Levi, you guys have too much of a temper. You went, you destroyed a city. You were cruel. You can't lead your brethren either. Judah, though, you're the one. You're the one that's going to lead your brethren. We need that stability. And let me tell you, the greatest things in life all come from faithfulness. You can't just be all over the place. You can't constantly be changing and expecting good things to happen. And these principles apply in every area of life, whether in church, whether in business, whatever it is. Being a vagabond is a terrible situation. And if you find yourself there, and you may, we don't know what's going to happen in this country. We might all be vagabonds before we know it. I know we're good for the next 3 years. We got Trump, right? But if we get another Democrat, we might all be vagabonds. That's what they're going to tell us here in a couple of years. We might all be vagabonds after that. And you know what? That's fine as long as you don't have the character of a vagabond. As long as you don't have the heart of a vagabond. Get yourself established. Be strong. Don't be a vagabond. Let's pray, dear Lord. We thank you so much for your word and the lessons we can learn from it. I pray, Lord, you'll help us apply these principles in our life. I pray you'll help us to raise good, strong, fruitful families. I pray this will be a good, strong, fruitful church. I pray this won't be a church that just attract, just a place where people come and have a good time for a little bit, but no, it'll be a place where people will come and be stable. They'll be faithful. They'll have good, strong marriages, raise good kids who love the Lord, and will be here years from now, Lord, and serving you until your return. In your name we pray. Amen.